Hello everybody, welcome to Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Clean Bandit, What is Love? Clean Bandit, Jack Patterson, Luke Patterson, and Grace Chatto. I have talked about these guys a couple of times in the past. Their debut album, New Eyes, was one of the first videos I ever made, and I heavily referenced them in the actual first review I ever did of Galantis' Pharmacy, even though in retrospect I really shouldn't have, because they're not even close to as similar as I made them out to be, but what are you gonna do? 2015 me was crap is a running theme of the past few months. Oh yeah, and they showed up twice on my best hits of 2017 list, which is nice. So I may as well just reintroduce these guys. They're among the most mainstream of mainstream EDM pop outfits. While I've personally never really been one to heap praise onto Billboard-seeking acts like them, of producers in this genre who can still chart occasionally these days, Clean Bandit are almost certainly my favorite. They've always come off to me as so lighthearted and innocent, and feel like they really love what they're doing, but they still have some respect for the genre they operate in, and even have a sense of humor every now and then. I still think their debut album, New Eyes, is just a flat-out great album, provided we're talking about the original that starts with Mozart's House and ends with Outro Movement 3, and not the reissue which replaces some of the weirder tracks with weak copies of their big hit Rather Be. I have had my issues with them in the past. They do have a definite formula to most of their tracks, but they've managed to keep themselves afloat on that formula by continuing to release great tracks in that same mold. They released a single last year called Symphony that made this album, and in my opinion, while totally following the Rather Be sound and construct, is probably the best track they've ever released. I've been anticipating this album for a really long time now. The lead single from here, Tears with Louisa Johnson, came out all the way back in 2015, and like 4 or 5 further singles have been released in the past 2 years, such as Rockabye with Anne-Marie and Sean Paul, Solo with Demi Lovato, and I Miss You with Julia Michaels, all now on this album. There was a part of me who was just really excited to finally get a new album from them at all, though there was also a part of me who saw the list of guest features and wondered how some of these were going to work. I mean, people like Ellie Goulding, Anne-Marie, Rita Ora, Charlie XCX, Marina from Marina and the Diamonds. Basically, any female singer could probably work well with them. If they can get me to like a track with Julia Michaels on it, then I don't see what else they couldn't accomplish. But there's some weird features here too, like there's a track with Kyle, there's 2 tracks with Kyle, and there's one with Big Boy from Outkast, what? And one with Louis Fonzi. Not looking forward to the obligatory reggaeton crossover attempt there, but they could surprise me. And there's a track with Bad Baby on it. Who the hell told him that was a good idea? I'll admit I didn't go into this expecting greatness on the same level as the original New Eyes. Seemed like they were making the same move as Disclosure did with Lyrical and going for as much pop crossover as they could. Which is fine, since they can do that kind of thing well, but there was still a possibility this could be a letdown. It had Symphony on it, so there was no way for it could be that bad. But I still went into What Is Love hoping for Baby or any other tracks not to hurt me. They could not go this video without making Haddaway jokes, sorry. So what did we get with What Is Love? It's pretty good, but I'd be lying if I said it was anything essential. I'll be honest, most of the best stuff from this album was already released beforehand, and as a whole, it gets a bit one-note and stale. I can't take the great tracks away from them, though. There's certainly a lot of highlights here, but I may as well just get my biggest issue out of the way with this album. One big criticism I used to have of a Clean Band is that they have a tendency to rehash. Like, there's a lot of singles of theirs that just sound like Rather Be again. And while I'm okay with that, this kind of frustrates me sometimes because they have a lot of weird tracks and deep cuts that shows they are capable of pushing themselves into new sonic territories, even while still keeping their hyper-polished pop sheen. Like, I was pretty excited when Rockabye became an actual hit, because it sounded different from their other tracks, had a slower and more tropical-sounding flavor, and even had a touching story about single mothers in the lyrics, which isn't something you hear about every day. That track shows up here, of course, and I still really like the track, even if Sean Paul excitedly yelping, "Deadly Struggle!" kinda makes me giggle a bit. And you know, there's not really any Rather Be clones on this album, besides maybe Symphony, and as I've mentioned before, that track has kind of transcended the formula it came from. No, the problem is that the vast majority of these tracks just sound like Rockabye. They put enough spin on that formula to make some of these tracks stand out more, but they don't pull it off every time. And while I do still think Rockabye is a very good track, I don't think it's quite as effective turned into a formula as Rather Be is, and a lot of these tracks don't have as interesting lyrical concepts as being about single mothers. Well, actually a couple of them do, if I read into them a certain way. Solo with Demi Lovato, she talks about doing it solo a lot, so that might be about female masturbation or something. Well, they say it's about a breakup, which is less interesting. So, yeah. I mean, I do also think covering up the F word with whoop 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 is pretty funny, though. We Were Just Kids is about love between siblings, which is cute. Most interesting idea that I heard here was maybe Out at Night. And while the lyrics are a bit too vague to know for sure, it might be about a cross-dresser. Like Kyle, he switches up pronouns at one point, saying putting that eyeliner on, he does it so well. As soon as he walks out the door, he turns into someone else. And then going into the chorus, which she only comes out at night. So yeah, that would be a pretty cool idea. That said, I also get the feeling this might just be about two entirely different people, a guy and a girl who come out at night, as it were. And, like, Big Boy's verse mentions that pussy, so only about a regular woman. He might be mistaken about it, though, and I don't know. I might be giving these all too much credit in the lyrical department. This has never been a genre that traditionally has much effort in the lyrics. But I can at least pretend they tried for something more ambitious here. It almost works. Yeah, Rockabye is the best lyrics on the album by far, and everything is pretty much all just breakup songs. They talk about showcasing all sorts of different kinds of love in the lyrics of these tracks, and, you know, no one's ever written songs about love and breakups before, right? Now here's the thing, most of the time, and especially in this genre, I can typically overlook vague or undercooked lyrics, because it's the norm. I'm used to never actually listening to them in the first place. If not for the fact that the band themselves said you out to listen to what's being said anyways, I wouldn't have bothered. As for the actual production, there are certainly standout moments. Like, the obligatory reggaeton crossover Baby with Marina and the Diamonds and Louis Fonsi was actually way better than I expected it to be. The guitars and horns, while pretty cliched for the genre, do actually sound really good and make for some standout textures. It is one of the more energetic tracks on here and has one of the better hooks on here too. I'm already someone else's baby. And the reggae-ish textures of Last Goodbye are pretty cool too, if not so much the four chords progression in some parts. Well, okay, there's not a ton of standouts from a production standpoint, but Clean Bandit can get away with it since I've always enjoyed their style on its own anyways. The trouble is that, again, these tracks just really start to run together, and the guest features don't always help. Like, Ellie Goulding's appearance here was a pretty big disappointment, honestly. She just has a lot of nonsense words, and if not for the fact that she is one of the most easily recognizable singers in this scene, this track wouldn't stick out at all. And it's even worse when the singer has less of a recognizable voice, like Rita Ora, Kristen Joy, Tove Strike, or Alma. The latter's appearance on the album's standard edition closer, in Us I Believe, is a really nondescript and forgettable place to end. And since I got the deluxe version, because I love the last track, Tears, it just kind of blends in the background. It's a really disappointing ending. Symphony should have been the ending and not the opener, by the way. I still do like the track with Julia Michaels, mainly because of the melodies and less because of her actual singing. But hey, she is still pretty easily recognizable. Though sometimes it goes in the other direction. Like, remember Bad Baby shows up on this thing? Yeah, it turns out even Clean Bandit couldn't get an appearance from her to work that well. Well, I guess her verse isn't bad, but she so obviously sounds like a little kid. I kinda wish this verse were given to someone like Cardi B, who doesn't sound so uncomfortably young, and make me really give the side-eye to bars like these. The good news about that track is that Charlie XCX gave one of the best performances on this album, so, you know, that particular track, Playboy style, it gets a pass. And Love Sisiga, or however you say that, he shows up on another bonus track called Beautiful. Now, I already really liked his appearance on previous Clean Bandit tracks, Mozart's House and Telephone Banking. The latter in particular is still one of my favorite tracks from them ever. But the track he appears on here reprises the progression from Telephone Banking in one little part, which maybe kind of makes the track feel less distinctive and like make me wish I was just listening to the original. this just wasn't as good. I guess a lot of them come down to whether I like the melody. I, for instance, could get into the hook of Shoulda Known Better, no problem. That track stuck out to me just for that, if nothing really else. Though We Were Just Kids melody, this felt somewhat off and didn't really stick with me as much as I'd like. And it's telling that I'm pretty much out of things to say on individual tracks, and there's several I haven't mentioned yet because I have nothing to say on them. Yeah, I'm very conflicted on this thing. Most of the new tracks I hadn't heard before were just not that interesting, and the overabundance of tracks that sounded similar to each other really prevented this from being all that fun to listen. But it still has Symphony on it, and Rockabye, and the deluxe edition has Tears, and Baby's pretty great as well, and there's other tracks that are growing on me, like Shoulda Known Better and Out at Night, and I Miss You. I just think this album's too one-note. Like, they were talking about having done tracks with Elton John, and they were super excited to release those, but didn't put them here because they didn't have the same kind of feel as the other tracks and were closer to Rather Be. To heck with it, they should have put those here. I mean, variety never hurts. Variety is why I love their first album. There's weird tracks on there like Up Again and Outro Movement 3 and Birch and New Eyes that aren't just adhering to one formula and shows they're not one-trick ponies. This album doesn't demonstrate that talent as well. And I guess it doesn't help that their knack for hooks happened to fail them a couple of times here either. Overall, What Is Love is fine. It's got good tracks and a couple of great ones, and I'll still take Clean Bandit over most mainstream electronic outfits. But if you paid attention to the pre-album singles, you've probably already heard the best stuff here already, and I'm not keeping the entire thing. It's kind of disappointing. I'm overall feeling a 6.5 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're awesome people. If you want to add yourself to that list or make me review something, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.